Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. With us tonight, we have a guest that works with disabled veterans. Disabled in a lot of different ways, but I'll let him introduce himself because he has definitely got the bona fides to do what he does. His resume is quite impressive. Michael Zacchea?
Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you for having me tonight. So I'm a combat wounded, medically retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel. I'm a veterans advocate. I work with a number of veterans organizations, but I run a 501c3 that's sponsored by the University of Connecticut. It's called the Entrepreneur Boot Camp for Veterans with Disabilities, and we help disabled post 9/11 veterans start businesses. We're in our fifth year now, so we've had 4 classes that have graduated. We've had 84 veterans graduate. Of the 84, we've had 59 start businesses. We've helped another 13 get full-time employment and another 8 get into a professional licensing or education credentialing program. Very recently, this past December of 2013, we have just started a Connecticut Veterans Chamber of Commerce. We're the 6th in the country. Right now, we're the only veterans organization that's registered to lobby in the Connecticut General Assembly, which surprised me. I thought that there would be many, but we're the only ones.
You would think, yeah.
We're tracking something on the order of 24 bills in this year's session that affect veterans and affect veteran-owned businesses. This is a trend that's starting to pick up nationwide. We are the 6th Veterans Chamber of Commerce in the country. The first 5 were New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Texas, Arizona, and a regional one called the Southwest Veterans Chamber of Commerce. The largest was in Texas, which had 169 members, which is a tiny, tiny fraction of the overall veteran-owned business community in Texas. Right now, we have commitments from over 200 veteran-owned businesses to join our chamber immediately. So we think that we're going to be the largest in the country, within a matter of a few weeks.
That's outstanding. Now, just to rewind, Michael was on the show a couple years ago, and I know it's always tough for veterans to talk about where they've been, what they've seen, because you guys see an awful lot of hard reality in life. But I remember you talking just briefly about the in Iraq, the first Battle of Fallujah, and some of the stuff you saw. If you want to just mention that briefly, and also I remember you mentioning you had been in Somalia. Right. During what we know as Black Hawk Down.
Right. So a little recap of my career. I had a very, what I consider, unusual career. I was in Cuba for the Haitian refugee riots in 1993. In 1994, I was part of a unit that we went to Somalia right after Black Hawk Down, and we covered U.S. withdrawal from Somalia in January, February, March of 1994. And then later that summer, in July of 1994, we were sent down to Haiti for the Haitian invasion. A lot of people don't realize or remember that we invaded Haiti very briefly, like for a month, in 1994. It was called Operation Restore Democracy. Mm-hmm. I guess to put the president who had been overthrown, Aristide, I guess, back in power. And then I went to Iraq in 2004, and I was part of a team. We were the first advisors to train, build, and lead in combat an Iraqi army battalion. So the insurgents immediately identified us as a high-value target. They wanted to destroy our battalion before we could become operational. So we experienced unrelenting brutality, and really, we went from atrocity to atrocity, numerous beheadings, infiltration, sniper attacks. We were in combat virtually every day. And then, anytime we tried to engage the Iraqi civilian population, and anytime we did any kind of military civilian operations off base, the insurgents would respond with just unbelievable atrocity. They'd just come in and behead everybody. So it was brutal. And then I was in the Second Battle of Fallujah in December of 2004, which is where I got blown up by a rocket-propelled grenade. And subsequently, although I refused to be medevaced at the time, I subsequently, after having a lot of problems, got vectored into what the Marine Corps had. It was a new unit at the time. It was called the Marine Corps Wounded Warrior Regiment. And I got the appropriate medical care and began my recovery with the Marine Corps Wounded Warrior Regiment. And that's how I got into veterans advocacy.
So how does a man who's been in that kind of situation, well, I see you've got a T-shirt on that says half full. Your glass is half full.
Yes.
How do you bring yourself? I understand that this is your self-appointed goal in life is to help people that have been in these kind of bad situations recover from those, if not in their rearview mirror, and if not putting it in the past, because it's always with you. But how did you get yourself from that point to that point where you can gauge other people's difficulties and help them move forward?
That took a long time and really a lot of work in both physical rehabilitation and mental and psychological and spiritual work on my part. One of the first things that happened was I spoke to a Marine colonel, full bird colonel, who told me that I wasn't just wounded, by shrapnel, that warriors are four-dimensional. And he said, we're physical, we're emotional, we're mental or psychological, and we're spiritual. And, that I had to understand that I had been wounded in all four dimensions.
Four dimensions. That's very interesting.
Yep. And that gave me some place to sort of put my feet and sort of, get my balance, if that makes any sense. And then I started, besides the rehabilitation and going, talking with counselors and, doing the hard work of, recovering from traumatic brain injury, I started really researching a lot of this. And a number of books that I read were very important to me. Three that I consider to be seminal are Jonathan Shea's Odysseus in America, which cast the epic poem The Odyssey in light of a veteran returning home. And I was able to understand my return home in that language, in that book. Another book by Edward Tick called War and the Soul. And that is sort of a survey of a number of societies, how they reintegrated warriors back into their society, including Native American cultures, where when a warrior came back from battle in which he had killed somebody, he would actually have a rebirth or a cleansing ceremony and be completely reborn symbolically, and they would give him a new name, which I found very, very interesting, because what that really talks about is that you have to develop a new identity. And then a third book by a retired Army lieutenant colonel named Grossman called On Killing, and that is about the psychological impact of really crossing over the greatest taboo we have in our culture, which is killing. So, we're raised, and our entire psyche is structured as we're growing up, that this is a taboo that you cannot break, and then suddenly you're in a situation where you're required to. And no matter how much training you do or how much, in the Marine Corps you chant kill, 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 and all that stuff, psychologically you're never ready, to look in the mirror and say, this is what I did and this is who I am now. So that helped me a lot as well. And just over time and doing the work and putting the hours in and putting the effort in, I was able both to, get to a point where I was in a position where I could start to help others, and then other people started to come to me to, for my help, and then I was able to formalize my efforts in the program that I run now.
One of my favorite movies dealing with what happens evolving out of a person's experience in war is The Best Years of Our Lives. The 4 men that come back, I believe it's World War II, and one has lost his arm, right. And one has more traumatic, psychological related injuries that you don't physically see on them, but they all have these disabilities, and they come home and everybody who loves them thanks them for what they do, but basically says, keep your distance, please. We don't want, don't let us know anything about, don't talk to us about what happened, please. Right. Is that similar? Is that still something that goes on?
The answer is both yes and no. So there are a number of generations that have experienced coming home from combat. So going back to, and I've actually read the history of how our nation deals with veterans coming back from war. Traditionally, and starting with the Revolutionary War, what we would do is pension off veterans. We'd give them a war bonus, and in the Revolutionary War, we gave them land, and they became farmers, and they became, really the first not the first landed citizens, but that was their reward for participation in the Revolutionary War. The Civil War really is the first time that we, on a large scale, on the scale of millions of soldiers, had to deal with veterans both in the South and in the North. And Connecticut was a leader in created one of the first veterans homes in Connecticut.
Oh.
Connecticut has a very interesting history related to veterans issues. But that was really the first time that there was sort of a societal understanding of the effects of large-scale industrial war. Abraham Lincoln is the one who said, the purpose of our purpose is to care for him who was born in the battle and his widow and his orphan. So he understood the enormity of the conflict. The next big war was the Spanish-American War. Again, Congress voted those veterans a war bonus. Now, after that came World War I, and those veterans came home, and they were getting screwed by the politicians almost as soon as the war started, and that's why they started the American Legion in 1919. They basically unionized because they were not getting sufficient support from politically. Congress and the American people didn't want to hear about the war then, and they didn't want to hear about people's experiences.
I remember you discussing Hooverville,
yes,
in Washington, D.C.,
right.
10 cities set up by veterans who were being denied things that they had been promised.
Right. Well, this is what happened is the Congress voted a war bonus, but they put it in a bond that was not did not mature for 20 years. So they, all these guys get back in 1918, 1919, and they get a bond for $100, I think it was then, and it's not payable for 20 years, and they're, it's kind of like a kick in the gut. So then the depression happens, the crash happens, and then they say, hey, we want our money now. And they march 40,000 strong on Washington, D.C. They set up the tent city, and Hoover turns a regiment, including MacArthur and Patton, on them, and there are fatalities. This is American soldiers attacking World War I veterans and incurring, fatalities. And FDR looked at that and he said, we can't let that happen. And very early on in World War II, he started planning for veterans coming home. At a time when the outcome of the war was still in doubt, he started planning for. So Pearl Harbor happened in 1941. FDR started planning for the veterans coming home in 1942. Is when they began working on the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, which wound up getting passed in 1944 before the war was even over, and that is what created, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act had 5 titles. So you be unemployment benefits for a year. You could buy a house, start a business, go to college, or get a farmer's debt. Okay. And that's what your 5 choices were. And he set up. It wasn't the VA, but it wasn't it was a big government sort of agency, similar to the Civilian Conservation Corps. But basically, that's what it was: is you got home, and your 5 choices, you got shunted into one of those places, and that's what you did, and you made it work, and that created, arguably, really the middle class of America as we know it today, and
absolutely
the most successful social benefit, social net program in our country had a 7-to-1 return on investment.
People took that money and did things with it
Yes.
that ended up bettering themselves, so they were able to return something back.
Yeah, absolutely.
To the government through taxes.
Right.
And
taxes, property values. I think the last World War II veteran. I'm not sure if John Conyers is still a World War II veteran, but Frank Lattenberg just passed.
Yes.
He was a World War, and
senator from New Jersey.
Right, he used a GI Bill to go to college when he got back from the war. And Andy Rooney, obviously, was a World War II veteran.
Yes.
And he just passed today.
Mickey Rooney.
Yeah, Mickey Rooney. I'm sorry, I said.
I think Andy Rooney was also in the war, but as a correspondent,
Yes,
I believe.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Mickey Rooney got a Bronze Star. So that was World War II in Korea. Now Vietnam, a whole other dynamic. Again, nobody wants to hear it. America's economy expanding, so those guys were coming home and they could get jobs, but many of them had difficulty because of their experience, and they were not getting the treatment that they needed, doing anything more than getting entry-level jobs and having hundreds of jobs and getting fired and all that kind of stuff. But again, America, people at home didn't want to hear about war experiences. The Gulf War, the first Gulf War, the 100-hour war in Kuwait. I wouldn't say that nothing happened, but that was sort of cast as we're doing away with the stigma of Vietnam. And then 2001, everybody thought, okay, well, this next war is going to be like it was in 1991, and here we are 13 years later just contemplating getting all of our troops out of Afghanistan, and having had a war in Iraq that lasted for 8 years. And now people are much more willing to hear about what people's experiences were in the war.
Did people have as many individual or combined deployments in a war like say World War II as they've had? Because I've heard about multiple people being deployed 3, 4, 5 times, coming home, beginning a little bit of readjustment, but always knowing that the likelihood was they're going back.
Right. So here's what the numbers are. There have been more than 4 million deployments downrange to either Iraq or Afghanistan from 2001 to today's date. 2.6 million individual deployments have gone downrange. So approximately 1.4 million of those people have deployed more than once. The potential for post-traumatic stress increases exponentially with every deployment downrange. So after your first deployment, the chances are about 25%. After the second deployment, chances are about 50%. After third deployment, chances are 75%, and then it keeps going up from there. Compared to previous combat generations, so Vietnam, you were in country for 13 months. Mm-hmm. And there was a point system that managed who went there. We don't have anything like that now. So the Army was doing 15 to 18-month tours at the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. The Marine Corps was kept on a 7-month cycle. Now, I was there because of the command I was in. I was there for 12 months, March 15th of 2004 to March 1st of 2005. But what I have read is that this generation of combat veterans has much greater exposure to combat than previous. So if you were in World War I, you might have been on the front line for 30 days in combat, but then you get rotated back to a rear area. Or if you were a Marine in the South Pacific, you might do an island campaign for 30 days, but that would be it. So nobody then was in multiple years of combat engaged with the enemy. This is more what's called low-intensity conflict. It's not like divisions and tanks and things like that, but definition of high-intensity combat is the firefight that you're in. So no, this generation of combat veterans has seen a great deal of combat, more than previous generations.
In previous wars, correct me if I'm wrong, I think maybe a lot of soldiers were involved in the type of things that the military contracted out to outside to companies, yes. Halliburton, etc., delivering meals to soldiers. A lot of soldiers were, as you say, in low, not in high visibility combat. They were delivering meals. They were doing other things. My dad in World War II was he strung a telegraph wire in the Philippines. Yep. So, which is not at all, there's danger.
Yes,
of course, there's danger, but there's not the kind of danger that the folks from Iraq and Afghanistan faced on a much more frequent basis.
Right, because there is no. Those wars, they were organized in terms of front lines, and there was a definitive front and a definitive line and a definitive rear, and you went to the rear, you could take your stuff. Now there's no such thing.
There is no such thing as a front line anymore, because the enemy is here, here, and here, and here, and here, and you're here, here, here. So it's there. You're always in the midst of danger.
Correct, yes. And, I really think that the aims of what we were doing in these wars versus the aims of what we were doing in those wars are very different. These wars evolved into nation building, and our military is absolutely not equipped and should not be doing nation building in Iraq or Afghanistan. And I think that's what exposes you to the constant danger from an insurgency that doesn't want what you're bringing them.
I have a friend, Melissa, who was part of the group that scrubbed down, washed down the vehicles, which of course included washing off radioactive substance because of the weaponry that they were using. And her immune system is shot.
Depleted uranium,
Depleted uranium. And that's something, I guess, that's something obviously that's never happened before. There've always been atrocities in war, but and also the notion that people that in previous wars, particularly in Civil War, where so many soldiers died of infection.
Right.
You don't have those. These folks in modern day warfare survive.
Yes.
And come home with not just incredible physical injuries, but also, as you say, the emotional scars of war.
It's almost miraculous how good we've gotten at the medical part of it. We can get a wounded soldier and get him or her into definitive medical care within an hour from it's called the golden hour. We can get them and get them to a combat surgical hospital inside an hour. It's even, orders of magnitude better than it was in the first Gulf War. So that part has really become phenomenal, but nobody has. We're seeing now unintended consequences of that, which are.
Let's bring it around full circle. Let's get back to the cup being half full.
Okay.
And we have a couple minutes left. Tell our audience what you're doing to undo those things.
What I really want to do is help people reintegrate their lives, create a wholeness out of their lives. So people come back and they're different, and we understand that. And what we're trying to do is get them to look forward. I'll give you an example. We had a guy who lost he's from Coventry, lost both of his legs, helping him start a business. We had some people come in who wanted to meet them, and this one guy was a corporate executive from the Hartford, and he was just completely floored because this guy who had lost both of his legs never thought about or never talked about his wounds or his injuries. All he did was talk about starting his business and what he was going to do and how he was going to do it, and he had a whole set of goals and a timeline and everything. And this executive was floored because he was like, I don't know how I would be able to deal with that if that was my reality. I don't know how I'd not be able to talk about it.
But in life you deal with things,
right,
or you give up.
Yes.
And you can't give up. We're not designed to be people that creatures that give up.
And I think that the veteran population self-selects that way. Because if they were people who would give up, they would have given up in boot camp, or they would have given up in Iraq or wherever.
Okay, we're going to have to stop it at that.
Okay.
The show's gone very quickly, as it always does.
Yes, amazing.
But looking forward to having you back and hearing other great things that you're doing, Michael.
Well, thank you so much, David.
Michael Zacchea, Lieutenant Colonel, retired U.S. Marine Corps, and a good human being that's helping others. Thanks. Good night.